Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as always, we talk with leaders about their leadership journeys and what they've learned along the way. And for this episode, our guest is Janet Schijns. She's the CEO and co-founder of JSG, a go-to-market acceleration firm dedicated to achieving results in the ever-evolving partner ecosystem with a simple mission statement: save the channel. Janet has worked with vendors, distributors, software providers, VARs, and MSPs in a wide range of technology areas, including mobility, services, communications, data, cloud, IoT, and security. She was formerly the EVP and CMO at Office Depot, Chief Channel Executive for Verizon Business, and she led the channel for Motorola Enterprise and Government. And earlier this year, Janet was appointed as an RSPA Board Advisor. And based on what you heard about her resume, you can see why we appointed her as a Board Advisor. Janet, hello. Welcome to the RSPA community and welcome to the Trusted Advisor.
So excited to be here, and thanks for all the engagement. It's such a great group.
Thank you. It's been great working with you. You and I have crossed paths somewhat year after year, being in the channel for as long as we have, but it's nice to be working shoulder to shoulder with you. So
it sure is.
So one thing that you've seen, and this is where I'm hoping we can start, is talking about leading through change in the IT channel. And so again, you've interacted with tons of solution providers over the years, so you've seen that change in our channel up close. What advice do you give to VAR and MSP leaders today, navigating change in terms of technologies and business models and vendor changes and how people work and everything that goes into it? What's your advice to VAR and MSP leaders?
Well, deep breath is the first thing, because there is just a lot of change. You could spend all day long, right, on the changes and maybe never get to what you need to do that day in your business. And so the first thing I really encourage people to do, and it sounds basic, but it's actually the hardest advice I give, is you have to redraft your business and your go-to-market plan. You really have to step back. You have to say, what is my business going to be this year, next year, 3 years, 5 years? And the 5-year horizon is probably the hardest, right? Because it's hard to know, are the robots just going to be leading everything and we'll just be, I don't know, on perpetual vacation, having robots work for us? No one really knows. But the today, 1 and 3 years should be an exercise you can do. And this isn't a static, write something, put it in your drawer. This is then change your entire operating model to do this. So we see a lot of people who instead just keep kind of layering on. So, digital marketing got important, I'll layer on a digital marketing intern or a digital marketer. AI's gotten important, I'm going to layer on somebody. But they've never went back and said, well, what about the jobs that need to be done in the rest of the business? And the example I'm going to give here is, if you look at sales, 5 years ago, the average seller spent with a customer, 51% of that customer's time was spent with a salesperson. It's now down to 14% of their time is spent with a salesperson. So do you still need your sales team to do the same job? And the answer is no. And I would actually argue, and I've had multiple people do this in their business plan and have it work, that you could cut your sales team in half as long as you did the right stuff on the other side of where the customer is actually looking for solutions, right? They're online, they're looking at webinars like this, they're asking their network on social media. So this kind of seismic shift in go-to-market hasn't translated to many partners' business and go-to-market plans. So that's always my first thing, is the way you embrace change is you stop and you say, how does it impact me? Some of the change means nothing, right? It doesn't have anything to do with me, nothing to do with my business, right? It's interesting, it's exciting. I like hearing keynotes about it, but it doesn't have anything to do with my business. The stuff that does, that's the stuff I've got to redraft my plan, redraft my operating model, retrain my people or hire different people, and really get into it. The minute you have a plan, all the breathless, heart pounding, I don't know what's happening goes away, right? And you have something to execute on. So that's my number one piece of advice on handling this change right now.
Got it. Thank you for that. And so I guess a question I want to ask on behalf of our audience, how do they do that? Because I'm not saying go through every plan. How do they find the time to do it with all the daily activities? Like, what do you see the most successful folks do? Do they have a regular time of year where every year we're going to talk about relooking at
Yeah.
our plan? Is it a quarterly thing or is it a variety?
Yeah.
Like, how do folks actually execute on that principle?
So most of the partners we've worked with that have done it well have polled the key members of their team. And by the way, this could be a 5-person shop, right? It doesn't have to be a big, monolithic, 500-person partner, although it works for them too. They've pulled the people away from the business for a day or a day and a half, and they've done the work, right? They've said, hey, we're going to be out of the business. We just had a client do this. We call it market action planning. We support this motion for firms that need that help. And we had a client that did it last week, the week of Thanksgiving, because it's slow, right? People aren't, first of all, retailers are not making system changes, right? Before Black Friday and Cyber Monday, it's not happening. They were shut down weeks ago. And the couple days leading up tend to be internal days for customers, right? Customers tend to have vacation, et cetera. So we pulled out on the Tuesday and Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And that worked really well. And so I would say there are always time you can pull out. We've seen some partners do it on a weekend. And hey, none of us want to work a 7-day week, but when it comes to once a year doing your plan, right, it doesn't kill you to work one weekend for the whole year. And then quarterly, we recommend that you check how you're performing against the plan. So maybe a 2-hour call meeting, go through the plan. Did you execute? Where are your gaps? Where are you exceeding plan, right? Where can you double down and kind of invest more? And then where do you pull back? Because it's not working. Just like once a quarter or 2 hours, just a heat check, as I like to call it. And then the final thing, which sometimes people think is interesting, but I always think it's important, is just a monthly spot check with all of the people that work for you or with you. And it can be as simple as an email that says, hey, let's send a happy face, sad face, moderate face. Click the one you feel it is on Teams, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. Just check in with the people, because the reality is your employee experience is actually more meaningful to your growth than your customer experience. Because if your employee experience is great and your employees are happy, they'll make the customer experience good. So that's typically how we find people making time for it.
Interesting. Got it. And it seems like it's super important to not just have that plan, but you're saying the follow through as well, because, the RSPA just went through our 5-year planning and, following the advice you have. But then there's, okay, what specifically needs to be done and who's going to do it, and make sure we have that on our weekly agenda where we make sure it's not something that was forgotten about or you wake up and you have to scramble.
Right. And no matter how good you are, like I sit on boards for big partners in the industry. And no matter how good you are, it's like the quarterback on the winning Super Bowl team, he still's a coach, right? And so you still have to look at it and say, what more could I do? How could I further accelerate my lead? So the hardest part, of course, is when your business is declining, to keep that focus on the change as opposed to the survival. Is a very hard thing to do, but it is the key to surviving.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of business needs, right?
Right.
When you're running out of cash.
We're going to run out of cash. And, then somebody says, you should update your business plan. That's a tough feeling, right? You're like, wait, are you kidding? But the reality is the reason your business is failing is because your business,
Got it. So thank you. So one thing that stands out from your bio that I shared, and you've kind of alluded to it a couple times, you've held leadership roles with several large companies. You have insight into those large orgs. Like we mentioned, Office Depot, Verizon, Motorola. You work with a lot of large solution providers as well. But today you lead your own small company. And I'm curious, from you living that, what do you see the biggest differences between being one of the leaders of a large company compared with now leading your own company? What are your top of mind thoughts on that?
Well, first, I would say that being in leadership in corporate America is not for the faint of heart. It is, you age about 5 years for every 1 year at a big company, especially at Verizon. With love to all my friends at Verizon, they would laugh and agree. It's a heavy.
Wait, can I ask, why is that? Why do you say that?
Well, you're looking at a $180 billion company. You're looking at shareholders that every day, for pension funds and others, wake up and look at your stock price. And so you're always chasing that shareholder return, which is your job, right? I sit on the board of, a publicly traded company, and I sit on the board of a privately traded company, and it's your job there too, right? It's investor return is one of your biggest jobs. And so when you're in corporate, you can see what needs to be done. if you're a good leader, and I, hope that people perceive me as one, you can see what needs to be done. Getting it through the sausage factory that is the big corporation is the problem, right? We've never done it that way before. We don't do things like that here. That's not how things work here. Let's talk about it again next month, right? And then you get to watch a smaller, more nimble competitor do it. And you never got there, right? And then you wake up and you say, how did Verizon, I'm going to use them as my alumni example, how did Verizon not create Facebook? Right? They had the connections, they had the people, they had the technology. How did they not create Facebook? They didn't create Facebook because they had the idea.
Yeah.
They didn't execute.
Yeah.
Because in a big company, it's the chorus of no's. So that's kind of the big learning I came away from corporate with was, one, while it was cool to be an entrepreneur, because I was an entrepreneur before I started that corporate journey and sold my company to Motorola. While it was cool to be an entrepreneur in a corporation, because you could break some glass, and amazing leaders like Lowell McAdam, who was our CEO at Verizon, would say to me, don't let us break you, you break us. Right? Like, you break us, right? I don't want you to fall into the corporate, it's just hard to move that big of a machine on a day-to-day basis without getting, frankly, a little frustrated. I did okay, but it is, it's a full and a half-time job. When you contrast that with having your own business, there's a pressure having your own business, which is that in that corporate America job, you get that paycheck, you get that bonus, you get that stock, right? You are a shareholder, so you feel pretty good about shareholder return. In your own company, every buck stops with you, every decision stops with you, every innovation stops with you, right? And so that's where I find the big difference. Like, the big difference is you can have a great idea and get everybody to execute on it, but if you have too many great ideas, you're going to exhaust your team as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have the 180,000 strong people to just pull, someone in. And I always tell this story because I think it's meaningful. I was at Verizon. I started the IoT practice at Verizon, actually. So now, many years later, it's all the rage. And I remember sitting in a meeting room and with our CFO and COO and a few other people, and saying, I think it's going to take about 181 people, $50 million in investment. This is how I would set it up. Boom. Walking out of the meeting with permission to hire 181 people or move them, right? And spend $50 million on certifications and testing, et cetera, at the blink of a hat.
Yeah.
You can't do that as an entrepreneur. Or you could have that idea as an entrepreneur, but you're going to have to go get funding and investors. And so the buck truly stops kind of with you, and you have to decide if you want to take your own personal money that's in the business and make that investment. Now, the fun side of that is that you do get to do what you want to do. So when I want to, and I do a lot of it, donate my time to things like being a board advisor at RSPA or to small partners. I hold small partner calls generally once or twice a month. Come on, ask questions, no charge, no fee, right? I can do those things. If you're in a big company, the big company is saying that does not drop to the profit line. Stop that, right? Like, just stop that. You need to charge for that. And so that's the second thing. And the third thing, which I think is probably the most meaningful, is the smaller company gives you an ability to take a chance on somebody. So in corporate America, there's very firm kind of algorithms and HR rules and everything that say this is who you can or can't hire. And there's a lot of various feeds into that, but I can remember wanting to hire someone who, by the way, I now have at JSG as our marketing lead. And well, she wouldn't move to Basking Ridge, so she can't get hired. And she's missing, the second advanced degree we wanted, so she can't get hired. And so you never got to take a chance on someone that you knew could do a really different, better job, but they didn't slot into the corporate view of what that job required. They were a risk. And so you weren't like allowed, right, to hire them. Or you weren't going to put the sweat equity in to fight that fight, right, all the way up the thing. And then what if it doesn't work? As an entrepreneur, you can take a risk. You can bring in the kids you met. And true story, you can bring in the kids you met because you were so impressed with how he was handling a customer complaint at a retail store.
Yep.
And say, you seem really good at this. What are you doing long term? Oh, you just graduated college, or why don't you come in with us and we're going to teach you this because you saw something in him,
Yeah.
who's now our marketing director and is a phenom, right? But you see something in the person. In corporate, they would never have let you do that. You're going to hire some guy who delivers cheesesteaks for Steve's Cheesesteaks. Like, why would you do that? There's 1,000 people applying for this job, but don't hire a marketing person, from Steve's Cheesesteaks.
Yeah.
But you could see it as a leader. You can see the talent, the raw talent. And as an entrepreneur, you can invest in that and bring those people in.
Interesting. So I love that. There's a bunch of directions I can go. The one that I'll ask this follow up is, when folks have been an entrepreneur and then they become a business leader and they've been doing it for years, I see them sometimes taking way fewer chances. And I don't want to say taking on that corporate mindset, but almost like, I'm just going to go with the flow and let this thing roll. And they lose some of that entrepreneurial or risk taking, drive that's behind them. They end up playing it safe. And understandably, they have a lot of employees who are counting on them. They have their family that's counting on them, right? They've been doing it for years, and it's hard to change that. What do you say to folks who their initial reaction is like, hey, Janet, my business has been very successful. I don't think I should be making big changes at this point. What do you say to counter that? Or not that they have to totally revamp their business necessarily, but to get that entrepreneurial edge back. What do you say to that?
So I would start with the best always get better, right? This is a saying I use all the time with people. The best always get better. And if you're truly the best, you're always looking to get better. I mean, look, you can have any kind of opinion on an Elon Musk, right? You can hate him, you can love him, right? But you can't deny the fact that he's always looking to find the next innovation, always looking to challenge things, right? You can't deny it. And so that is that spirit. That's that entrepreneurial spirit in a big company. And so what tends to happen, what I find is, you start to surround yourself with the echo chamber. And in big companies, there's a pecking order, right? And if the VP walks into the room and everybody who's not a VP, kind of, excuse me for saying it, sucks up. I'm from Jersey originally, so, our language is a little rough. And they will swear that an idea is a good one just because of the level it came from. In an entrepreneurial world, typically you look at the idea based on its merit. And so what happens, I think, to my friends who have went into corporate after being an entrepreneur, is they begin to fall for their own, they start to buy their own lies. They start to buy their own half-truths. Maybe I won't be as mean as to say lies, but they start to get comfortable with inertia because everybody surrounding them is no longer pushing them, no longer driving them. They're applauding them. But if you watch that journey, if you watch a person go into corporate America, and typically they'll go in, let's say, at a VP or director level. If you watch in 5 years and they haven't gotten up to SVP, EVP, right? I'm very proud of the fact that I climbed, right? They haven't climbed, then they lost their entrepreneurial spirit. And because they were hired for the spirit. Like, never make a mistake about it. The company knew they wanted you to break some glass, and then you start laying back. And that's, you may stay forever, but you'll never get ahead. You won't get a new job. They won't lattice you into another experience. It may even be not a promotion, right? It may just be a lateral move somewhere else in the org so you can learn more so they can get you ready for a promotion, but they don't get those opportunities. You also see them out in 18 to 24 months. They're serial. They start to go in somewhere. They're there 18 or 24 months, or in the next place 18 or 24 months, or in the next place a year, or the next place 6 months, then 2 years. You see this hopping happen. And the person never stays anywhere more than a couple of years. And these are just red flags for me that entrepreneur is struggling in the corporate environment. They're not making an impact. So what I did when I got to Motorola, I worked for Greg Brown. This is the CEO, still the CEO of Motorola Paris Government, and a brilliant man. And he told me, don't surround yourself with the echo chamber. It was probably the best piece of advice, because I said to him, what advice do you have for me coming in as an entrepreneur into a company? And he said, don't surround yourself with the echo chamber. Find some disruptive voices. And I have worked with a gentleman, Josh Klein. He's probably one of the best speakers in the world, but also one of the best coaches in the world. He's the gentleman who actually taught crows how to put a quarter in the feed machine in Central Park in New York to feed themselves, right? He's that kind of, because you would go, you can't do that. That's not going to work. And yet it did. And he's a hacker. He's a growth hacker. He was actually a hacker, almost went to jail for that. And then he became a growth hacker, and he's a challenger, right? Like he's just a challenger. And I would have him in when my team and I did our annual planning exercise one year. I had him in. And, everybody got up in the corporate moray of, we're going to present this plan. Everybody's going to give their polite little applause. We're going to file the plan because it hits our budget, and, good for us. We'll have dinner and go home. And he was like, that plan sucks. Like, they presented the thing, and he was like, that plan sucks. And everybody in the room just kind of went, oof.
Yeah.
And then it was like, it kind of does. Like, everybody started having that moment where they were like, it really isn't what we wanted to do. Well, what did you want to do?
Yeah.
Right. And we started talking about, what would you do? And I always use this example. One of the issues we had as a channel at Verizon was our commissions were horrifically inaccurate for our partners. And one of our directors said, well, why don't we just trust the partner? Whenever they tell us we owe them, we pay them. Like every year we put a $20 million, we're going to fix the commission system plug-in. Every year IT cuts it. Every year the partner's told me, what if we just said, and we reserve the right to audit you?
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it was like a sea change. When we announced that, the partners felt trusted and loved.
Yep.
Right? It's a very entrepreneurial thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. We saved money. We didn't need systems changes. And Josh was a big part of pushing the team out of the comfort zone. I also used a woman, and she does an amazing job for anybody who's looking for leadership coaching, Melanie Spring. She's also super different, right? She's all about your best personal self. She's all about reflection and getting in touch with the part of you that's vulnerable. And so I surrounded myself with people like that in my echo chamber, so that I didn't just have everybody going, yes, you're so smart. Yes, you're so smart. Yes, you're fabulous. And so we did very well. And as a result of that, obviously my career did very well also. And so my coaching to entrepreneurs is always two things. Just one, don't start believing your own PR, right? Get that echo chamber that's going to challenge you. Get that personal board of directors who's going to push at you and say, come on, that's not good. And then the second thing is, take the time to stand back and say, if it was my money, would I do it? And we instituted something when I was at Office Depot where we called it badge on the table. So would you put your badge on the table for this and agree you're going to lose your job if it doesn't work? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right. And oh, by the way, that same badge, though, goes on the promotable list if it does work.
Yeah.
Willing to put your badge on the table, yes or no? And you'd be surprised how many times somebody came in convinced that they needed $100 million and 1,000 people, and then you go badge on the table, and they're like, no, because an entrepreneur puts their badge on the table every day.
Right. I was going to say the VARs and ISVs, they don't have badges, but every single day they're putting it on the table. Their badge is
on the table every day. If they make a bad move, they go out of business.
Yeah.
They lose money. Their family has to mortgage a house. They can't afford to send their kid to school. Whatever their thing might be. And in corporate, it's just a little too easy, right? You have a $150 million budget. It's a little too easy to spend $150 million.
Yeah. No, that's helpful, talking about the insulation. And one book I've read, it's called Disrupt You by Jay Samit. And it's really good where it talks about like either someone from the outside is going to disrupt you, or you might as well disrupt yourself. But that's why I like where our members, get together, talk with other members, because they're going to give you the no BS answer and tell you what's worked for them and what hasn't worked.
And they're going to challenge you, right? To say, what? Like, why are you doing that? Why do you have 5 people doing that? I was on with a partner the other day. They're at 30 million, which is a good size partner, right? And they're struggling with how they're going to get to the next level. Debt levels are high, burn rate is high. Every time they turn around, they're spending more money. And when you started looking at it, it was because they had taken that peanut butter approach, like spread peanut butter on white bread and it all breaks up, right? They were trying to spread it as opposed to saying, this is our one big bet.
Yes.
Yes.
So you got to double down on the change.
Right.
So before we take a commercial break, before I dive more into your personal journey, I want to get your perspective on a broader topic in the channel. So one thing we didn't mention in your bio is you've co-founded two organizations to help women in the tech industry. So I want to talk about women in leadership in the channel. And so my perspective, what I've seen, like I see several women in leadership positions at large vendor organizations.
Mhm.
I see some women in VAR leadership positions more than 10 to 15 years ago, but certainly not like, an
Right,
overwhelming number.
right.
But from a software provider standpoint, like almost zero, like close to
Yeah,
zero female leaders. So again, that's what I'm seeing in terms just in terms of, numbers and,
yeah.
and volume. What is your take on the state of women in the IT channel? Improving, static, regressing, not improving enough, improving in leaps and bounds. Like I want to hear your perspective on it.
Regressing.
Okay.
It's actually regressing, and that trend has been happening since right around the start of COVID. And the reason for that was there was a lot of demands on females during COVID. Kids were home, elderly parents, right? There was just a lot of demands on women, and those tasks tend to fall to women. Women definitely benefited from remote work, without a doubt. But then, as things started to become more hybrid and return to office and travel came back, we saw a fair amount of women opt out and say this is just not worth it. But we also saw, and it's interesting, and I can't name the what, I can just name the what's happening, right? Um, we started to see almost a backlash from the Me Too movement, from all of the movements that were supporting women. We started to see a backlash, and some of it was deserved, and some of it wasn't. Right? It's like any other backlash, right? It
Yeah.
it hurts the good and the bad. Were there cases where things were pushed too far? I'm sure there were, but that doesn't mean that everyone should get wrapped up. And so, interestingly, the Lean In org, which is the one that Sandler started from Facebook, they actually saw men unwilling to mentor or manage women, the rate of that increase every year in the last couple of years. Some of that, I think, probably was started by the Me Too movement, people being afraid, right, to mentor or be one-on-one with women, which is horrible. That shouldn't be the case. But two, again, like I said, I don't know why it's happening, right? I just know what's happening. As the layoffs started, women tend to be more likely to be in marketing, more likely to be in programs, more likely to be in HR, in legal, in finance, in areas where the big cuts we've seen in the tech industry have come, right? And the tech industry led the layoffs, right? They were first to the layoff
Yeah.
game early on, right, in 22. Start and heavy in 23 and 24, as we all know. We've had many friends impacted. And women seem to get hit harder because they were in those roles that got hit. Marketing got hit hard.
Yeah.
Channel programs got hit hard. Again, finance, HR, legal, they got hit hard because they weren't sellers, they weren't product people, they weren't software people, to your earlier
Yeah.
point. So there weren't enough women already. And then women got hit pretty hard in the layoffs, making it, kind of a double impact. So what I'm trying to do with my two not-for-profits, one is towards helping women get back on track in their careers. Tech World's half, really helping people make a career plan. Think about where you're going. And we support that through our Advancing Leadership Network, which has courses and curriculum and mentors and everything to help women get to the leadership level. The other one I do with my family, actually, and that we donate all profits of JSG to. We don't take any of the profits from JSG. They all go into the second foundation. One is really focused on women that are younger in their career and financial independence, and teaching women how their career creates that financial independence and how to get to a point where you're financially independent. Now, you may say, as a listener, Jim, you may be thinking, why is financial independence so important? Women that are financially independent are 9 times less likely to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being abused, either verbally or mentally every day, it's very hard to be good at your career. We see, and by the way, if you're thinking, oh, no one I know in this industry is being abused, at any point in time in their life, 1 in 5 women will be abused by someone in their family or someone they know. I am a survival of domestic abuse. I was hospitalized after a horrific attack. After years of emotional abuse, it turned physical, and I was hospitalized for that abuse. I talk about it because if it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And so I am dedicating myself, and my new husband, second husband, obviously, is very supportive, as are my children, to help women avoid that. And the best way to avoid that is for women to get a good career in financial independence. That is the best way. It's how I was able to leave and get out of a bad situation when many people are not. And so I talk about it a lot. If you're listening to this webinar and you are in an abusive situation, please contact me. I will help you. We will help you get out. We will help you get help. We will help you get the resources that you need to get out of that horrific situation and start to gain your independence. But that's why I do what I do, to help other women avoid that history that I have.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I'm sorry that you've experienced that, but God
Appreciate
bless
that.
you for helping other people. Is there anything we can do as an industry? And this is where, like, I'll give you an example. So we're going to talk about RSPA Inspire the Leadership Conference in a little bit. When we had Jay McBain on a panel a couple of years ago, we invited him, and he said, "I know what my wife is going to say," and so he and his wife is involved in the channel.
Love Michelle's worked for me, so yes, I know Michelle well.
And so she's been involved in the channel. He said, "I know she's going to say another manel, right? It's just a bunch of male panel." But part of it is like Kathy Mead, our VP of Education, I talk about who to put on the panel. A lot of times it's like we don't see a lot of women in leadership positions who are then also attending the Inspire event. Not that there are none, but it's just a lower percent. And so, like, there are some things, I won't get into all the details, that we've, done to try to encourage and get women, on stage as moderators or things of that nature. But like, what could the listeners do in terms of, and the viewers do in terms of improving the situation? Because it seems like there's half the population that is not being brought to the table.
And I always tell them, first of all, my best sponsors and mentors have been men. So men have to be involved, right? We can't say, oh, let's let the women go in a room and figure it out.
A separatist society is not the answer.
Exactly. And I hate then when it's all female panels, because I'm like, no, that's not really an answer. So what I tell men is, look, pick somebody who's developing in your organization. If you're an RSPA member and you're listening to this and you're going to one of the RSPA events, pick a female in your organization who you think has the headroom, right, to grow. Bring them to the event with you. Show them around, introduce them to people, make sure that they start to develop a network of others, right? That's how we're going to make the difference. The difference is not come to the event, talk about it, right? The difference is bring somebody. And maybe even Jim, we develop a women's developing network at RSPA or something, but that's the first thing. The second thing is talk to women and say, what's your career plan? Where can I help? Sometimes the simplest thing. Right? Like, just where do you want to get in your career? How can I help? I have a 1-page career plan that I send out to people, and it stuns me how people struggle to fill it out at first. But once they do, it really clarifies exactly what they want to do. And that to me is the discussion. It's just, where do you want to get to? Because not everybody wants to be in the leadership realm. Some people are very happy being an individual contributor with an expertise. But what do they want to do? What are their goals? What are their ambitions? And how do you personally help them? And it doesn't help them when we sit around and talk about it. It helps them when we say, you know what, I'll spend an hour with you and show you how to do that. Or you don't know how to read a P&L. Let me show you how to read a P&L, actual actions that will help them develop.
The actual teaching, building their knowledge and skills. So before I get to the official commercial, I'm going to give a couple plugs. First, we are launching in 2025 for all our listeners. We're calling the Future Industry Leader Program. So if there's a student who's affiliated with an RSPA member, they can go to Retail Now for free and get to experience it, just like what Janet was just talking about. Yeah, so reach out to us, folks, if you're interested in learning more about that. And also say just a message just to the men, because I've been in the the spot that you alluded to, like, boy, do I go in this car with a woman? Do I go out to lunch? Like, would I do that and all those things? And to me, it's like, if you do that same thing with a guy, you do the same thing with a woman. Like, just make sure
Exactly.
you are behaving on the up and up in every situation whatsoever. And even if when there are no women in the room, you shouldn't be making comments like, it's just us guys talking about these things.
Oh, I love
And
you
if a
so
guy
much.
brings it up, no, you
Yes.
have to be able to shut it down and say, that is not appropriate. So just
Right.
a quick aside, I remember interviewing a woman and she was an attractive young woman. And so guys would say like, oh, we got to hire her. And I'd be like, you can't do
Right.
that.
You can't
Don't
do
say,
that.
hey, I'm
Right.
just joking. It doesn't matter if you're joking.
Doesn't
Like,
matter.
you
Yeah.
just
It's
can't.
uncomfortable. And you wouldn't like it if it was turned around and everybody was like, oh, he's handsome. Let's hire him. Right. You would
Right,
say, what? You wouldn't
right.
pick somebody based on that, on either gender.
Right. And then
Um,
if it's acceptable, why did you wait until she was out of earshot before you said it? Like,
correct.
it's not acceptable.
Correct. If you
And
wouldn't
so,
say it to someone's face, you shouldn't say it behind their back. Right.
yes. So that's what I
Yeah.
guess my message to so I guess the other thing is I went to a a very I'm trying to think the word I'm looking for, but it was a Christian school, and they like the pastor had a rule: I will never be alone with a woman like in a car driving somewhere. And I'm like, come
Like,
on, like,
why? Because
yeah.
because you're worried you're going to do something wrong.
Exactly. I'm like,
That's, yeah.
what a terrible statement, because it made it look like women were lesser. And it's like you're gonna have a one-on-one meeting with a guy, but you won't have that with a
With a
woman.
female.
Like,
Well, and that's what that lean
yeah,
in organization data showed. Men
yeah,
didn't, 64% of the men said that they didn't want to have one on one alone with a female. Like, that's just unacceptable. It's,
unacceptable.
yeah,
Unacceptable.
unacceptable.
So
Yes,
that's what I guess I say to guys, if so you got to do those meetings, but the pre-work you have to do is don't don't be an a-hole, and don't be making misogynistic comments or treating women
correct.
like objects that people would suspect or think. And here's the whole thing. You do run the risk if you do go and somebody could accuse you of something. Yeah, they could, but a guy could accuse you of something, whatever. So
Right,
just
exactly. A guy
do
could
the
accuse you too, right? I
just do
mean, we're in a
exactly
world
right.
where gender is very, fluid,
Yes.
right? And so it could be anybody who accuses you of doing something,
Yeah.
not just a female.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, yeah. So, the guys, overcome that barrier. Invest in all your people. Don't be drawing lines, artificial lines, especially based on gender. So,
I
all
love
right. Well,
that.
this will be the most awkward segue into a commercial. Let's pause here. And let our listeners and viewers know about the Retail Solution Providers Association. The RSPA is North America's largest community of retail technology, VARs, software providers, vendors, and distributors. To accelerate your success through an RSPA membership, email membership@gorspa.org. Also, we want to thank our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsor is Blue Star. Our gold sponsors are CoCard, Epson, Heartland, and ScanSource. Finally, registration is open now for Inspire 2025, the Retail IT Channel's premier leadership conference. RSPA Inspire is set for January 26th through 29th in Curacao. For more information, visit gorspa.org/inspire so you can experience networking nirvana. And I wish I had to make this whole segue complete. We had record female attendance at Inspire last year, and we're hoping to do that again
That's great.
this year.
Well, I'm
We had
looking
record
forward to being
attendance.
there.
Yes,
Yeah, I'll
exactly
drive
right.
the
So
number up to +1.
thank you. Thank you. And so, speaking of Inspire, you're going to be moderating a discussion there that's titled How Leadership Styles Shape Organizational Success. So, can you talk about, as we begin this journey down your personal leadership, how would you describe in particular your leadership style, Janet?
I always struggle with this when people ask that, because the trite answer is I'm a servant leader, right? If you look at those charts, right?
Sure.
I'm a servant leader. I serve my people. I think it was Descartes that said, "There go my people. I must follow them because I'm their leader." So I very much believe I'm a servant leader, but I think it's more nuanced than that now that we're also leading machines, right? With the advent of AI, it's really not about just the people anymore. And this is a interesting moment in our industry's kind of leadership journey, which is, what kind of leader are you going to be when you have humans augmented by machines, or potentially just machines augmented by humans? If you think about the journey Microsoft's on with Copilot, right? It's machines augmented by humans.
Mm,
Um, and so I think that now my style of leadership is one of discovery and understanding. as opposed to servant. So my job now is to look and understand and be the person who demonstrates that understanding of a new way of working, because people are afraid. That's what I'm really seeing, particularly knowledge workers in our industry they're afraid. Like, is AI coming for my job? Right. And I tell everyone AI is not coming for your job. The person who uses AI to do your job better, they're
Yes.
coming for your job.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to encourage people that are leaders to kind of walk back their leadership style a little bit from when it was just, hey, whatever the function of my team is, I can lead them to take that hill, right? And try to think about how you learn and discover the new ways that people are going to work. That's a lot more nuanced, and the hill is a little more of a, lattice or something than a hill.
Yes.
And how do you put people in the right spots in it so you have the board coverage, almost playing tic tac or checkers,
Hmm.
versus take the hill. And so my leadership level is, I think, evolving because of that.
Got it. Interesting. So I guess what are you doing then to keep up? Like what things do you do in order? How are you changing? What things do you do to make sure you're changing in the right direction?
Well, the first thing that JSG we do a lot of is reverse mentoring. I started this actually when I was at Verizon, which was that each of the executives in my team had to have a mentor way down in the organization, someone new to the organization, but that had skills they didn't have. Social media being a phenomenal example of a skill that many people of a certain age struggle to understand why it's important. Um, and younger people tend to know exactly how to make it sing. But to have a reverse mentor, to have somebody who is actually day to day struggling with those very issues, whose job is being augmented by AI, who is using the tools, who is thinking about things differently, right? Who's, buying something in a store with Bitcoin. People that are just different and have different experiences, and really launch that reverse mentorship. If you're in a small partner company and you don't have that, go and look for that at your local tech school. Go and look for it at your local, look for degrees, gaming degrees. They tend to be really interesting to people that want to build games and softwares and things like that. Go and look and ask at your local community college, right? Who's showing skills in this? I need a mentor. At first, it sounds very counterintuitive. How could a 22-year-old be a 45
Yeah.
or 65-year-old's mentor? Seems like, what? But it actually works, right? It challenges you. That's the one thing I'm doing, is surrounding myself. We
Yes.
call them the kidults.
Yes.
We were struggling to find a word for what they were, because they're technically adults, right? They're over 21, but they're still young. So we call them the kidults. They love it. Kids that are adults. And they really have made a difference in how I lead, because they challenge, they don't know. Right. They don't know that the world is supposed to be hierarchical, as a great example. And so they see a flat world, completely flat. Social media. Think about Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, like whatever you like, Facebook, I don't care, right? Although Facebook's kind of like your grandma's platform, but whatever. Um,
Might have to find a
just
30-year-old to 30-year-old
yeah,
adult. Yeah.
yeah, adult to help you there. Maybe 40. But if you think about those are not hierarchical platforms. Those are something where anybody who, if they create good enough content, can become important.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a degree, a background, or whatever. And so that kind of flat concept of how the world looks is
Yeah.
something that's really changed my perspective as a leader. That old fashioned, okay, if I want to solve a problem, I'm going to go to the 3 people, 5 people, whatever, that report to me and say, guys, figure this out. You never would go like 4 layers down in your org and ask somebody down there. That wasn't
Yeah.
even permitted in some big companies, right? So your leadership style became very command and control.
Yeah.
Now my leadership style is very much flat. Anybody could have a good idea. Anybody can bring an idea. I could reach out. I have calls with the folks in our organization that are entry, new to the job, new to the role, new to the company. I talk with them more than I talk with my leaders,
Hmm.
to get the real pulse. And they're giving me ideas that the rest of the team, frankly, wouldn't even see,
Right.
because we're so ingrained in our domain expertise, right? I mean, we're talking my team at JSG, like most of the people listening, their teams are highly talented, lots of years of experience, lots of years of doing it. Where all the bodies are buried and all the secrets are, but they don't know what's happening in the outside world that's going to change how a shopper shops.
Yes.
So I was out with a group of folks that I mentor. And I said, I was in Chicago for an event, Microsoft event. And I said, I want to go out with you guys. Let's just go out. So about 6 of us went out and just do whatever you would normally do. So in the first half hour, they went to 2 different Starbucks. Now, why would you go to 2 different Starbucks in the first half an hour? Oh, because they were looking for a collective cup that they wanted, and they weren't going to buy from the first Starbucks because they were hoping the second Starbucks had the collector cup. And then they walked in the store, but they ordered on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
They still did the mobile order, even though they walked into the store, right? They were like, oh, that's too much work. And then I'll just wait for my mobile order. And you started to see behaviors. So we walked by a theater and said, oh, I wonder if that show is any good. Well, phew, one of them's on Reddit, one of them's on Insta, hey, stand in front of this theater. Let me know if you did it. Hit me up. They managed to score 4 free tickets to the show.
Wow.
Because somebody had tickets they weren't going to use.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a different way they think about retail, about hospitality, about grocery, about everything. And the final part of the story is we walked into a grocery store, and how they shopped was so different than how we kind of go to I at least go to the grocery store with like a purpose in mind. I have a list. Yeah. I'm going to buy this stuff. No, they were like browsing in a grocery store. They wanted to interact with the product. Where do you think these eggs are from? Like, where they wanted to interact. And in the past, I was always like, seriously, you're going to put a QR on an egg carton so I can see where my eggs were raised? Like, that's weird. But they actually played it. Like, oh, cool, that's cute. So it's just a different journey. And so as a leader, I'm trying to make sure that the voices I hear in my head about our journey are actually what's happening in the industries that we serve, as opposed to what we know used to happen.
Yes.
And that's what's been the most, I think, substantive for me.
Excellent. Yeah, it seems like a recurring theme for you is making sure you just don't have a bunch of people around you, whether it's staff or people in the industry who are doing the same thing you're doing, and so they're just going to all encourage each other. Yeah.
That's good. So. And it's so true. When you've taken the hill 20 times, you feel like the 21st time you can take it again, right? And then that experience comes back to hurt you.
Yes.
Because you can't see the broader vision of what's actually happening now. And so people will say, I've talked to VARs all the time, and they go, I'm exhausted. I'm working harder than I've ever worked before. Yeah. Why are you working harder than you ever worked before? Because the thing you used to do that had an 80% success rate, then had a 75%, then a 70, then a 60. Now it's like a 30% success rate, and you're still doing it.
Yeah.
And particularly getting new clients is the area where I see people just killing themselves to get new clients. And it's gotten, and they'll say it, so hard.
Yes.
Well, that's partially on you as a leader for not figuring out the actual way to get clients in a new digital world. And it is going to get harder and harder and harder until you just don't get new clients.
Yeah, and there's a blending of your experience and the new. It's not the throw
exactly.
one. I remember working with a coworker. He was actually older than me, but he said, like, any rule that we have that's 10 years old, we should throw it out. I'm like, thou shalt not steal. Like, that's been around for a while. Like, so there's some things that are tried and true, but then there are other things, like you said, you have to mix it together.
Or tweak them. You tweak them. Yeah. Yeah.
So my last question for you, Janet, since we're almost out of time here for talking today, I'm hoping you can talk about an experience that shaped you as a leader. It could be recent, or it could be from really early in your career. I'm curious, like, about a learning experience or a story that you can tell us that, like, has shaped you as a leader, like one story you will never forget, and it's kind of in that foundation of a lot of what you do as a leader, if you're willing.
So I know a lot of you have seen me speak. And I'm considered to be a very good speaker. And I say this for a reason. So I was a horrific speaker. I was the most horrible speaker. I got out of school and I joined the leadership development program at Lancome. Lancome owns L'Oreal, Nestle's part of that chain, right? Nestle owns Lancome. And they had this great, they own Sandoz. So they had this great leadership development program. I joined. How fun, right? Out of school, big cosmetic company, New York City, right? I give my first speech and it's bad. It was bad. And I know from being in college, I'm a horrible presenter, right? It's like my big fear, like most people, right? More afraid to present than to die. And this was this seminal moment as a beginning leader on the leadership track. The gentleman who was running that group, Jack Kincannon, See, still remember his name.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't believe that I was a bad speaker. And I said, no, but I am. Like, seriously, like, at church, at college, at everywhere. I've tried everywhere. I'm bad. We're going to send you to this thing called CommuSpond in New York City. It's a school to help people communicate, because I don't believe I made a bad hire. Now, a lot of bosses would have said, oh my God, she's a horrible speaker. She's never going to do well in this program. The next time we have a list, let's put her on it and get rid of her. He said, I don't make bad hires. So you're going to go to this school at night after work. You're going to learn to speak. And I'm like, this is not going to work. And then I got here and they watched me and they taped you and they humiliated you. And then they finally said, it's coming out on the stage where you're getting hit. It's that first moment when you walk out, you get the nerves and then you can't keep going. So they retrained me to pick. They had me watch tons of video. Pick somebody when they walk out on stage that you think is like badass, right? You're like, I wish I was like that. And mine came up to Johnny Cash. I loved how he swaggered on the stage, right? He swaggered out. If you watch me speak to this day, you'll see me do it. He swaggered out with his head down a little, and then he raised his head up and he said, I'm Johnny Cash.
I'm Johnny Cash.
Right? And you were like, what? It was like the woo, right? So that's who I picked, all the way down to starting to wear longer jackets, duster jackets, black on stage, primarily black colors on stage, like really channeled him. And even when I was introduced, like now, later in my career, Janet Schijns, you're the voice of God. I still come out and go, hi, I'm Janet Schijns, right? And I make a joke out of it, despite how it looks like it's spelled, that's how it's pronounced. And it made all the difference. That 5 seconds, right, lets me get on stage and be like, I'm okay, right? And they taught me wear some music backstage, get out of your head, listen to the music, get pumped up, walk out, I'm Johnny Cash, right?
Yeah.
And then you're fine. And they were right. My content was fine. It wasn't bad. It was that I got out there, I got nervous, I got deer in the headlights, I couldn't get out of it. I was nervous the rest of the time. I come out, I'm Johnny Cash until I'm not nervous anymore, right?
Yeah.
Johnny Cash was never nervous a moment in his life. And so that was a leadership lesson for me, because what it showed me, Jack Kincannon, wonderful man, you don't make bad hires, right? That confidence that if you went through the process, you don't make bad hires. Figure out what's holding the person back and get them to do it, and they will capture the world for you. And then that leads me to the next part of this lesson. So as I was leaving L'Oreal, went and had kids, and wanted something that wasn't in New York City with 150,000 air miles a year. It was hard for me to leave him, right? And he said to me, oh, don't worry about it. You never leave Team Kincannon. He said, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, you need me, you call me. And I've carried that with me. And so I always say, you never leave Team Schijns.
Yep.
Now, what I came away from that with was 2 things. And I mean that. People that have worked for me 20 years ago get laid off, call me, I'm helping them try to find a job, or they'll come back to work for me, right? You never leave my team. You're part of my team for life, was what I took from that. You really invest in people, right? If you believe you made a good hire, you made a good hire. Don't throw them out, right, just because of a mistake. But what it really came back to, when I looked at what he did, was that he was kinder than the situation called for, right? He truly was, because I was bad at it, right? And he could have been that boss, and he wasn't. He was kinder than the situation called for. And so that's my leadership mantra, is in every situation, I'm kinder than the situation calls for. And I've gotten a lot more mileage out of my people than most leaders do because of it, because they know I'm going to be kinder than the situation calls for.
But there's an element to it was kindness and candor. He didn't say, oh no, Janet, that was a great speech.
That was a great
Keep
speech.
it up. Oh, you're awesome. Like heart symbol, stuff like that. Like he was saying, like, no, I believe what is in you just needs to be built,
just needs to come
and
out.
Brought out.
Right. Exactly. And so I've really operated under that. People can do anything if you help them, but be kind, right? Be kind about it. Because it would have been so easy for him to just be like, hey, get rid of her, right? That would have been so easy for him, much easier than this, right? This path. but he took the harder path because it was the kind thing to do for someone who had picked a job out of school and come and invested in your future. And so I kind of try to run myself that way every day to give people a chance, be kinder than every situation calls for. But I love your take on it, but also truthful, right? And I was just I'll kind of wrap up with this. I was just at an event this fall and watched a speaker, a CEO of a company, speak, and he was horrible. And everybody in his echo chamber, after he got off stage, told him how great he did. And then the next week, they were wondering why no partner signed up to be a partner with their company.
Yeah.
And he called me and said, "What did you think?" And I said, "Oh, you were horrible." I said, "I'm sorry, it was horrible." I said, "I don't know what happened. I know your content was good. I don't know if it got shook coming on stage. I don't know what happened. But here's what I'd recommend." I gave him a couple things and he was like, "Thank God, somebody told me the truth." And so, I think to your point, the kindness isn't always blowing smoke at people. The kindness sometimes is being the kind enough person to tell the truth to someone that works for or with you.
Yeah, the way I've always viewed it is if you're crossing the street and you see the person stepping off the curb and a bus is coming, it's probably unkind to say, "Get back on the curb." You're gonna be like, "Don't yell at people." It's better than them getting, plowed over
by the bus, right?
by the bus, right? Like you have to be the one who
the truth is kind. Yeah, the truth is kind.
Right. It's how you do it, but you really care for that person and their development. You are not going to let them fail. And so if you have to be the one to tell them, you got to be the one to tell them. So
that's right. Absolutely. And you can always use that Oreo cookie approach, right? Like a piece of good news, like, "Wow, I really loved your content. I know you struggled a bit with the delivery. I do think your solution is great for the partners. So how else do we get the word out?" Right? Like, so you can sandwich it in between goodness.
Yes, there are good parts. Here's how it can be done better.
Correct.
So, well, that's a fabulous story to end on. So, well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. Before we go, big thanks again to Janet Schijns for sharing her wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, please visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening and goodbye, everybody.